Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the RotoGrinders So Rare podcast. I am your host, as always, Sean, PSU Fans 2 Newsham. I have a special guest for everyone today. Some people might find him a bit controversial. I personally do not, but I want to give everybody a great view on everybody within the platform. So we're trying to find people with medium-sized galleries, big galleries, small galleries, to give everyone a broad view of things. So joining me today is one of the massive galleries on Sorare, and that is AJ Romero, who goes by the handle A.J. AJ, how are you doing today?
Hey, man. I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
Perfect. So thanks for coming on. Yeah, I wanted to give everyone a viewpoint on sort of like what thought process goes into some people that have massive galleries and sort of how they decide to get involved and what their like origin story was Sorare. So AJ, what made you jump onto the Sorare platform last June, it looks like, and decide to go in as heavily as you have? I feel like of the new people that have come on, I probably came on stronger than almost anyone. And I assume at that time you were the person that fit that bill.
Yeah. So I'll answer that one at a time. So what made me go basically all in, as you're accurately saying, into Sorare was just the unique value that I thought it was providing. And I've talked about this on other shows, but the fact that it was crypto based. So I was already in the crypto space and looking to invest more heavily in projects around that. Fantasy sports, which is obviously your background, and I also, not as much as you, but I love fantasy sports. I think I'm decent at it. And then the fact that you could use data and analytics, which is like my actual trade skill. I thought, wow, well, this is perfect. Like, let me play this game. And it was not long. It was maybe a few game weeks that I played. And then I was convinced, all right, let's step up. This is a good platform.
Yeah, that's literally the same process I took. I came in and I would say the first 2 to 3 weeks I was feeling my way around, buying some things slowly, and then right after that I'm like, all right, let's go. We just jumped right in and yeah, it was sort of a seamless process. But like as you can see here, guys, we're gonna go through AJ's gallery. We're gonna go through some decisions he makes on a weekly basis, and then also on an auction basis. We actually just talked about one previously going in to the show that he had today. So it'll be good to do. And then we'll talk a little bit about some big stars that are coming onto the platform that maybe have not been there. Wink, wink, Messi. And we'll talk about what AJ's thoughts are with that, because I have some thoughts on what I think it will go for and where it will be as well. So here's a look at AJ's gallery. So as you guys can see, my gallery is around 230-ish ether. So it's about a quarter to a fifth of AJ's. AJ's generally fluctuates a bit heavily because his cards are so big in terms of quality, whereas mine will stay a little bit more stagnant because my guys are not that quality players. So for example, like this Bruno Fernandes is worth like half of my gallery. So it's a card that is
You want to trade?
Yeah, it's so much bigger than it's like, want to buy gallery, I'll take 2 cards. So anyways, so what came to be you receiving the Bruno Fernandes card? I know you are a Manchester United fan, which I'm sure played into some of that as well.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. It's my favorite card for sure. I mean, when I joined and I was starting to get into uniques, Zura was there, and he was, more than willing to sell me cards, which you can't say about every large account, and really just help me like get up to speed on the platform quickly. And anyways, he owned the Bruno Fernandes before, and I always wanted it, of course, and it was basically never up for sale. And I forget exactly what it was that changed Zura's mind. You'll have to have him on the show and ask him sometime, because I don't even really know. But yeah, it was around Christmas last year, and he kind of said, hey, maybe I'll finally consider selling this card to you. I was like, oh, okay, really? Like, and then we got talking price and numbers, and it's kind of like you were saying. We talked about the card before the show, and hope we get into that one again. Sometimes there's just not a price that you can set on a card, and we settled on 99 ETH. It was just kind of a cool number. Like, oh, right below 199. Like, yeah, that's nice. And yeah, we did the deal. He put it up, and that's the story. He still owes me a shirt, though.
Yeah, I'm sure
Because
Zura needed it to go towards like his yacht so he can sail around France.
I think he had to pay his taxes or something like that.
There
He
you
was in
go.
need of capital.
Yeah, so something AJ and I talked about earlier today is, and we'll talk about it a little bit here with his purchase today. Some cards, especially when you're looking at unique level cards, are so perfect for what you're looking for that you just have to pay what the price is on them. And that is whatever you can get it for at auction, or if you're buying it off the secondary market, whatever that price is. Those cards are either the incredibly collectible cards, I would say, or the guys that are the best in terms of scoring in the fantasy aspect of the game. Bruno Fernandes fits both bills, especially the back end guy, but a little bit lower down the list, we'll talk about a guy that fits the bill a bit more, and that's Ryota Morioka. So you bought Morioka today. Why don't you talk about your thought process going into that?
Yeah, exactly. I have a list of cards that have been waiting for months, close to a year on some cards for their new season unique to come out. Because they are, like you said, they either fit the bill of ultra collectible or they're just the top scorer at their position and likely will continue to be for years to come, even as all cards come onto the platform, all clubs. And so I take both strategies. There's cards I have that are collectible, and then there's cards that I own because they essentially just print money. They're just the best player. They're going to help you win your division every single week. Yeah, and so Morioka was at the top of my midfielder list. That if I add this guy, it's going to make my team so unbelievably strong that it almost didn't matter what the price was. Of course, there's a limit. There's always a limit, but figuratively speaking, there was almost no cap, right?
Correct. And looking at Morioka, as everyone can see here, this is probably the elite midfielder in the game. Like, I would argue he's, from a standpoint of scoring, he's better even than a Kroos or a Kimmich and De Bruyne, those guys. So this is a player that obviously name recognition is not the same. The league is not the same. So there's that negative aspect with things. And you look at things, however, and his scoring is very consistent to these other guys. If I click on similar players here, you're going to see, I mean, Beezus is not a similar player. He just pops up probably because of the L15. But Toni Kroos is a similar player. So we'll pull up Toni Kroos and we'll look at his scoring. And if you click on all, you see him and Morioka are literally the same player. Like if you showed this graph versus Kroos and you showed the graph versus Morioka, you're going to see two guys that are the exact same. Like as you see here, you can't really tell the difference. So the thing is a Kroos unique. Do you own the Kroos unique? I don't believe you do.
No, Zura does.
Okay.
And let's just say the valuation on that card, because I inquired recently, is 3 to 4 times higher than Morioka.
Yeah, and I remembered I talked to Zura about Kroos unique at some point, and I think his valuation was somewhere between 50 to 100 ether at that time. But
so I got the friend discount.
yeah, you were getting the friend discount probably. So if the situation now, granted, that was months ago, so like ETH price was different, things were different at the time, compared to now. So if he could completely have changed things, so you effectively are getting the same exact player, same exact age levels, just different regions for 20% the price. The thing is that people don't understand is Morioka can play, Toni Kroos can play in Champ Europe. Morioka cannot. Morioka can play in Challenger Europe. Kroos cannot. Otherwise, they are the exact same card, except from a collectability standpoint. So if you're looking at pure utility and playing wise, you can play Morioka in All-Star D1 and 2. You can play him in Challenger Europe D1 and 2. You can play him in the Global Unique division, which I know you focus on primarily. And this is a guy that's going to score better than every other card in the division. So having a card like this, even at 10 ether for you, this is a card that is going to just print in terms of returns as you own him. So is that sort of what went into your thought process between like getting him or getting like a Toni Kroos type of card?
Oh, absolutely. You're right. And the place that I do want to use it is in the unique division where I've been very competitive lately. and I wanted to keep that streak going. And yeah, so either I can buy Morioka for about 10, or I can go and get Cruz for 40 to 50 ETH. So it was like a no-brainer. The other thing strategically to think about for me, especially because I want to use it in the unique division when I can, is think about who the other owners of his unique are. And that's something you have to do on a lot of cards, is why are you getting this and who else has it and who's going to be playing it against you. So the other guy who owns it is Ilfe, and he's somebody who competes with me regularly in whatever division I will use this card in, unique, champs, all-star. Yeah, so essentially now I know I'm almost safeguarded against Ilfe beating me in a way.
You are.
And okay, well, I have Morioka, he has Morioka, so those cancel out, and then it's who has the best other 4 cards.
Correct. And that's actually a thought process that I've had to deal with, and then you and I have talked about it a bit, is that at the beginning of the year, before I bought him, you had Sean Johnson unique, and I had Sean Johnson super rare. So every single time where we played them in the same region, you would get a better score than I would for Sean Johnson. So, for example, I remember one of the first times I had Sean Johnson in Global America, or I think it was in Champion America D1, and you also had Sean Johnson's in Champion America D1, and I think he had like 80. It was like a massive game for him. And so you got like 20 extra points than I did because he was a unique compared to mine that was a super rare. And so the thing is that your players were far superior than mine on the rest of the team. So if I overlapped, and that was another situation. So in Alexander Ring, unique came up. This is another one of AJ's favorite cards due to the fact he's an Austin FC player. And he is a guy that came up. And when he came up for auction, I was like, man, if I get this card, you see Alexander Ring here. And it's nothing against Alexander Ring's scoring, because he's the exact player I was looking for. As you see here, very consistent mid that puts up good scores. But if I bought an Alexander Ring unique and then I had a Sean Johnson super rare, every week I would go in like down 25 points to AJ. So it was a decision where I'm like, I don't want to go overboard on Alexander Ring compared to AJ, because they'll put me in a massive disadvantage every week. I want to be as different as I can from him elsewhere. Now, do you think about things like that as well? I know there's really no one on the site that has a bigger gallery than you. You have one of the biggest, if not the biggest gallery. So like you have that edge where like you know that your cards are probably better than most people's. So do you think about things like that? Like if Carapoo has a Morioka unique, are you sort of like, all right, well, he might have an edge on me with Morioka unique versus each other? Or is it not something you have to worry about as much on the bigger end of scale?
I think about it not on a game week by game week basis, but more overall, like season level, season length, you know? So that's why I looked up, okay, who had the other Morioka? Oh yeah, Ilfe. Oh yeah, he's always right there battling me. Okay, for the next year, he and I will be the only ones who have Morioka unique. But I'm not gonna decide where to put my cards, you know, based on that every game week. That's almost overkill. It might be worth it, but that's a little bit. I hear you. It makes sense.
Definitely. So from a collectability standpoint, I know everyone has different angles within Sorare, and that's something that we talk about when we talk about things in our conversations about utility versus collectability. I know that I am typically more on the utility standpoint. I know other people that are totally more on the collectability standpoint. You're sort of someone that I would say falls in the middle of things between utility and collectability. Like I know you will get cards like Morioka, who is more for utility purposes, but then I also know you are someone that will go out there and buy the 1 of 10, 1 of 100 type of cards on players. Like I know a big collectability fan person that you're a fan of is Chris Wondolowski of the MLS fame, and you went out there and bought his 1 of 100 cards. And other guys that are more reasonable cards, I would say. Aiden Clark and other American-related players that you bought 1 of 100 cards, 1 of 10 cards. So what goes into your thought process when it's about collectability versus utility, with everyone understanding like there is no right or wrong answer as of today? There might be in 5 years from now in terms of what the right answer was, but as of today, it's sort of a broad horizon of like, hey, we don't know what the best option is right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most people, if we're talking if we're sitting on cards for 5 years, I think everyone's going to be a winner. But yeah, it'll be to varying degrees. But yeah, for me, I mean, the collectability can get kind of crazy. I mean, you see some of the Mbappe unique and a lot of the Real Madrid uniques, Neymar unique that went for 75 ETH last year. So those obviously all fit the bill, but those weren't cards that I wanted to go for. I kind of like chasing more niche collectability that not everyone sees yet. So I'm hoping there's some upside down the road when people realize, oh wow, that player's pretty good, or he turned out to be good. So I'm actually chasing. So you named two good ones. Chris Wondolowski. That is somebody that nobody looked at for utility. I don't think he was even supposed to be playing this season. So the fact that they printed his card made me pretty happy. And he's the MLS top goal scorer of all time. So that's the only reason I got him. It's pretty, special record to be a league all-time top goal scorer. So that's the only reason I have him. And then, yeah, you mentioned Caden Clark. So he's a young 17-year-old kid, New York Red Bulls, another MLS player. That again, I don't think a lot of people are looking at from a utility standpoint, and isn't that big of a name with our European counterparts. So he was somebody I thought, hey, I'm probably one of the only few people who recognizes his potential and is willing to go after his, 1 of 10, 1 of 100, and fortunately got the unique.
Exactly. And we'll look here quickly at the price point. So as you can see, in terms of price points on Chris Wondolowski, like AJ said, AJ gave you the reason of why he went for Chris Wondolowski and what the reasoning was behind him. This is the one AJ bought. As you can see here, this is the 0.6 ether that AJ paid for. Number one MLS goal scorer of all time. Let's say 10, 15 years from now, the MLS has taken off and this league is massive. There's not going to be very many Chris Wondolowskis that were printed, period. And AJ has the number one edition of that card if it becomes a big league and people are like, man, I want a card of the number one goal scorer of all time. They're going to be like, wow, the 1 of 100 would be the best possible card of him in the rare form. They're going to look at this. Similarly, you can see his prices as they went, steadily went down. And this is a guy that, again, doesn't provide utility because he's not the best card, but the price also wasn't immense. You weren't paying 10, 15 ether to get a Chris Wondolowski. Now, I know some of you that are listening are saying, I don't have 0.6 ETH to spend on a card like this. That's totally understandable. And not everyone does. And that's why I wanted to give everyone a viewpoint of different ends of the spectrum. I want to give everyone a view of what people at the top end are thinking and what type of cards they're looking at. And then I'm also trying to give you guys ideas of if you're coming onto the platform and you have 1 ETH to spend total, what should you be looking for? And that will be our show later in the week. So make sure you guys tune in there. And if you are a new listener, make sure you check out the link in the description. You can sign up for Sorare and receive a free limited edition card for after you purchase 5 cards off the auction house. So if you're just coming in, great way to get started. And then we'll look here at Caden Clark as well. And we'll see what he's going to be going.
This one was pretty extreme.
This one was a bit extreme. But again, it comes back to things every card has a unique collectability to it, I'll say. For example, there is a Real Madrid fan on the platform. If a Real Madrid unique comes out, he's probably going to pay a significant amount for it. There could be a situation where there is a massive Caden Clark fan that comes onto the platform that has a favorite number that's 32, and their favorite number is 32, so they want all the 32 mints of any card. So every collectability and every card has a collectability aspect. Now, granted, the 1 of 100 might market to more people than, let's say, the 32 of 100, but each card could have a unique collectability aspect to it that you need to consider. So as you see, AJ spent 1.667 for his rare, and then the price dropped off going down to the second one and so on. But his prices remain stagnant. Now, let's say from 10 years from now, Caden Clark is the best American player in the world playing for Manchester City, scoring 20, 25 goals a game. This is going to look like a massive bargain being the first card that was ever minted of him as a rare. So that's just something that you have to consider if you're at the top end and you're looking for a collectability standpoint. But like as we talked about, AJ is also someone that goes for utility. He looks for a Morioka card. He looks for other good cards that are guys that are utility. So he sort of goes from both ends of the spectrum. He's trying to cover himself in the event the collectability aspect takes off and the event that the utility aspect takes off. So I think it's a great way to approach it. I approach probably more utility than collectability, but I mean, I do have 2 Joao Felixes, so you can't say that I don't go for collectability, right?
Yeah.
Sucks.
No, well, you're also, earlier in your Sorare career, if you will. So definitely, how long have you been on? 6 months now?
I've been on since February.
Yeah. Okay. So 6 months. So I definitely wouldn't say in my first 6 months that I knew to go and get these special serial numbers and stuff. I can think back to trades and deals that I did in my first 6 months where someone was buying a card for me. Let's say I had multiple of them, and they were like, "Oh, which one do you want me to send the offer on?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't care." And they would go for the 110. I'm like, "Does that even matter? What does that mean?" So I think down the road, it's something you'll definitely probably get into once you've settled with your, once you're happy with your like mainstay guys in your utility, and then you'll kind of be like, oh, let me go find this interesting card that has no utility, but I really like it.
Exactly. And it is something even I noticed. Like I notice right now that any of my purchases to improve my team per se are significant in terms of expense. Like for me to legitimately improve my team most of the time, I'm looking at spending an ether or more on a card. But yeah, like you said, like it's definitely a situation. Like I have recently bought a few more cards because Champion Europe was starting and I had ideas in my brain. But I went through like a month patch where I was buying like a card or 2 a week, and that was pretty much it. So it definitely gets to the point where you get to a spot where you don't have the expenses you previously had, and you can utilize that ether elsewhere. So like for you example, we'll talk here a little bit about scoring and returns on the cards and what we're looking at. And this is a view of your current week. And if the week ends right now, which AJ and I were talking about beforehand, he has a bit of a fade in the unique division, which is one of his priority divisions towards an AC Milan player today. If he does not score over about 65, 70 points, AJ will win 4 ether. If he does, AJ will win 0. So this is probably, I would say, honestly, one of AJ's weaker weeks in terms of recent times. And this is, again, like, yes, he has a big gallery, but you also still have to make decisions, which we'll talk about. We'll go back to last weekend, and then we'll go to this weekend. Where last weekend, I know AJ had a great weekend. As you see here, he won that unique division. He won all these other things. What was the average? And we'll talk about later what you are part of with Blackpool. But what was the number that came up that said how much you won last week in rewards?
Oh, shoot. What was it, like 10, 15?
Yeah.
ETH worth of
so AJ won 10 or 15 ETH last week, which, as you can tell with his gallery and how much it's worth, probably like 1 to 2% return on his entire gallery last week. Now this week it's going to be significantly worse compared to last week, possibly significantly worse. But
yeah, if I don't win the unique division, we hope maybe we're looking at 1 ETH.
Exactly. But we can talk through like some of the decisions he made last week and looking through some of his teams. And as you see, his unique division team won with a score that was significantly less than what might lose this week. And that's with an MLS team. So it goes back to what we talked about previously. This is an MLS and Asian team. Nobody in here is a 20 ether card. Everyone is relatively cheap, I would say, outside of Eduardo. And Lodero and Rui Diaz are a bit more expensive too. But these are not guys like Cruz that has cost like 30 ether. And as you see, he won 4 ether with this group right away, which probably paid for Gaspar and Willis effectively.
Yep.
So cost effective wise, it handled things. But like, as you can see, looking through his week last week, I know for you personally, you prioritize, I would say, the U23 division. This goes back to, if anyone missed our strategy conversation last week that I had, it goes to decision making and risk. And I know AJ has a different perspective when it comes to lineup building than I do, and he's more willing to take risk, but which again, you see results in some bigger rewards at the back end of things. So like, for example, U23, D1, and D2, I would say you take the most serious, along with Champion Europe, all the divisions. So, like, let's look through some of those divisions here quickly, and like what went through your thought process when setting your lineup for these divisions.
Yeah. The first lineup I'll always set is Champion Europe D1, which you're looking at right now. And that one's pretty much set for me. I mean, Italy wasn't playing last weekend, so this one, it pretty much just set itself, right? I mean, Lopez is actually, I think, my only starting goalkeeper. Diaz is a no question every single week. Bruno, when you spend 100 ETH on a card, you're going to use it every week, kind of blindly, especially as a Man U fan. And it was a good score last week. DePaul, unfortunately, didn't start. And then Fekir is my only other forward. So it all just kind of set itself. But yeah, so I'll go there first. And the strategy for me is to go after the biggest possible prizes. And like you're saying, my risk tolerance is extremely high. And that's kind of all I'm going for is like, I want to win first place to get the star or super rare. And I want that to be in Champion Europe because those are the most valuable. And then U23 D1 would be next because that's the next most valuable. And then I'll take a look at the unique division. So those are like the three that I go to first, like right there in that order.
And there you go. So like so AJ right now, like we're talking about AJ's order of operations effectively. So for me, my D1s are effectively set. As he just talked about with his Champion Europe D1, he doesn't really last week, he didn't really have to make decisions. We'll go to this week in a minute compared to last week where those were his options. He had to play them pretty much. My D1s are pretty much like that at all times. I might have to make a decision at midfield each week or forward, but effectively, I'm not really making decisions. So my D1s are pretty much set. I generally will start depending on where the prize pool is, and I will look at the Division 2s for Asia and America and U23. And then I will generally do Division 3 depending on where that is and break things down that way. So the decision-making process is completely different. So like as you talked about this week, you had really no options. So we'll go back to this week's schedule and talk a little bit about De Bruyne, because I know you and I talked about De Bruyne, and what I would have done and what you would have done is completely different from this perspective. And obviously, I prefer my method. You prefer your method. Doesn't make either or right or wrong. Just means we have different ways of setting our lineup. So like what for you went into plugging in De Bruyne, not only in Champion Europe Division 1, but Division 2 and Division 4?
Yeah. Looking back, actually, even with the decision making that I will employ, I actually probably should have maybe taken him out of one of those other lineups. But for D1 and using his unique, I mean, the news was wishy-washy. It was iffy. You know, he came on as a sub last weekend, so I saw him play. I was like, okay, he's on the field playing. He's effective. And then the news during the week was, what did you say? He's kind of in pain during training. He didn't finish his training session. But it wasn't like they came out and said, he's like super doubtful. It wasn't clear. So for me, like you're getting at, the risk and the strategy for me was to go full boom or bust because they were playing Norwich, and you see the score was 5-0. Right. So had he started, even if he only made it 45, 60 minutes, he probably would have had an 80 to 100 score, and hopefully I'd be looking at, podium there.
Correct. And as we see here, like let's give De Bruyne let's give him 60. Let's just give him a decisive. We'll keep it simple. Yeah. So he gets 60 and he's at a 1.65 multiplier. Let's call it close to 100. Yeah. So if AJ gets 100 out of Kevin De Bruyne, he is right up there, right behind the podium. If he gets an 80, AJ's probably on the podium or right about there. And again, this also comes with his goalie being very, very poor and Bruno Fernandes being very, very poor. So like if Bruno Fernandes gets a 60 to 65 that he normally gets, if De Bruyne gets 60 to 65 that he would normally get, all of a sudden AJ is up on the podium here, getting a great result. Similarly, like if Kevin De Bruyne gets a 60 here, all of a sudden you're talking he's up around 490 or so. 490 would push him up into like second place or third place. So he'd be on a podium in Champion Europe getting ETH and the reward, which granted, as we all know, the rewards for the start of the season appear to not be as good as what we hope them to be soon. So those are just some of the decisions that he might have to make. And we talked about some of the decisions he has to make in terms of looking for cards. So like myself personally, when I'm looking for auction buys, one, I look for really good utility players that are going to score well, that are probably cheaper than what they should be compared to other guys. And then also what I do is I look to complete stacks that I may have. So for example, we'll look at my team for this week and see what I'm looking at. And so, for example, you're going to see my New York City stack that we talked about. So, for example, I'll look for like a Maxime Chanot. I'll look for his unique on the market. If I see that his unique's out there, I'm going to be in that auction. Now, granted, I'm not someone that will generally overpay on a card. I'm going to make you pay more than you should pay, but I'm not going to overpay on a card.
So you're me minus one bid.
Exactly. You're gonna pay more than you should, in my viewpoint, on that card to get it from me. But I'm not going to pay 6 bids over, which actually I almost did for Chanot. I did almost pay more than him, but I made that price went high on Chanot. So for example, like I look to complete stacks. The other one I have is my Philly stack that we've talked about, or the Champion Asia. So I have gone and completed this stack. So for example, I had these two, and I had a blue Takoaka, and his unique came on the auction house, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go get this card, which is actually funny because in my opinion, he's the best
oh my gosh, that's
goalie on the platform. I don't think there's a goalie better than him right now. And I paid 1.5, 1.
And he's only 25 years old.
He's only 25.
I've never even heard of this guy. So
exactly. And so this goes to our whole discussion too about like there are thousands of players that everyone has to consider. And so I personally prioritize like all of the regions, but like the Austrian League just came on the platform and I've been really busy the last 2 weeks. So I haven't been able to dive into the Austrian League. Or for example, a league that's been on the platform is like the Argentine League. I'm not familiar as much with like the Argentine League and their players as I am with the MLS, for example. Like if you throw an MLS unique up there, I'm going to be pretty confident I know how much that guy should go for. I'm pretty confident in knowing about that player. Similarly, I would say with Asia at this point, Challenger Europe, same things. But there are still blind spots. AJ just told you he prioritizes U23, Champion Europe. Those are like where he wants to focus on. And I know he also prioritizes MLS. We just didn't talk about that. So if a card comes up, AJ is going to look at those cards. But Asia, and I know AJ and I've talked about it, he doesn't care very much about the Asian players. So, for example, he didn't know this guy existed, but this guy's pretty much the best goaltender on the platform. Like you look at his score lines, he's one of, if not the best goalies on the platform right now. So it's a situation where I got a value. I paid like 1.7 for his unique, and he will outscore most every goalie average, and he fills a stack. But anyways, for example, like I will look to fill stacks, not necessarily in D3 and D4, but in D2 and D1, I will look to prioritize some stacks. Like, so for example, I had a stack in Challenger Europe D2, which did not come in for me this week, which was unfortunate because I had a really good week. But a guy that I have is like Robin Proper. So he's very good consistently. He's a guy that's underpriced from what I believe he should be. It's a guy that smashes week in, week out. And he transferred this year to FC20 in the Dutch league. And so if I would decide like, hey, I want to like complete this stack so I can run this in D2, I'm going to look for his goalie, Lars Understall, to come out with a super rare card or maybe a defensive partner. But I actually have his like long-term defensive partner. He's just out injured. So what do you look for when you're looking to make purchases? And I know, so like personally, I seldomly anymore look for rare cards. I imagine you don't look for any rare cards at all right now. So what are you looking for in terms of like, hey, new auction just came out and got posted. Let me look to see if this card is there or anything like that.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I've kind of got this list, and it's really more of like a graph diagram that's essentially all of my unique and super rare cards cut up by every region and then by position. And then I've got their SO5 ranking, if you will, like when you go to the player ranking page. And so in an ideal world, of course, everyone would just want the number one ranked SO5 scorer at every position, and then you're set. That's pretty impossible to do with uniques since there's so few of them and there's a lot more managers who own them or want to own them. So I essentially look at gaps. So I'm like analyzing my current lineup and where's my biggest gap. So like for me, like a big hole is champion Europe forward and goalkeeper. So I mean, I have Ciro Immobile, which most people might say, "Oh, don't complain, he's great." Yeah, he's great, but then he's maybe ranked like 10 or 15,
correct,
on forwards, where the rest of my players are kind of in top 3. And for me to continue winning, I'm going to need to upgrade that forward. So I've got a list of maybe 5 guys who are better than him, and so I have them all favorited, and I'm following on Sorare, and I just wait for the email to come through to see when they're on auction. And so now I almost don't even go to the auction house. I mean, I'll check it like once or twice a week, but I'm really just relying on these like emails and all the people that I follow. And then I have a bunch of like rules in my Gmail inbox, so it filters it just for uniques and stuff like that.
That's fantastic news and fantastic information. And yeah, so like as we're talking, like my gallery, I have guys that are not quite as good in a lot of positions, especially when you're talking blues and uniques. So super rares and uniques, I'm generally not going to have, like, for example, I do not have a Lewandowski super rare. AJ does. I have a Carl Toko Akambi super rare. But so if I look down here, Toko Akambi scores okay. He scores what you would consider solid. And this is similar, goes into what AJ was talking about with Ciro Immobile. If I look at the last 40, Toko Akambi scores 45. If I look at his score lines, I see some solid 80s and whatnot that go out there. But you see there's a lot of inconsistency and a lot of like 50s or less. And that's because he doesn't always get decisive. If I look at Ciro Immobile, and I actually have looked at him and I actually know his issues. So as you can see, he scores quite a bit. He has a lot of decisive. However, he does not get into the 80 to 90 point range that often. And when we're talking Champion Europe Division 1, Champion Europe Division 2, these regions, you need to be just smashing in 80 pluses to really compete. So for example, I'm going to look at not even the top. We're going to look at like Insigne. And he is someone that is not quite at the top end, but he's higher. And usually he has a lot more 95s, 100s, 88s, etc. So
everything's kind of moved up like 5 to 10 points for him. Even his floor there is what, like 50 versus Churro. He'll just get 35 if he doesn't score.
Exactly. And so the problem is, and I look at things like this. A unique is worth 10 points more, 10 to 15 points more than a super rare, which is worth 10 to 15 points more than a rare. So for example, in Division 2, a rare Insigne is the same as a super rare Ciro.
Yep.
Similarly, in D1, a super rare or a unique Ciro is the same as a super rare Lorenzo. Not saying that Ciro is not a great card, because as you see, Ciro is like a top 15, top 10 forward in Champion Europe. The issue is that in the top levels, you need to have the best players. So for me, and I've done this, I've actually looked through these lists, and I'll explain why I bought the players I bought. So, and I'm talking more the rare version compared to the super rare version. For me, there is 3 forwards that stand out more than everyone else, and that is Neymar, Depay, then Lewandowski. I know that you see, obviously, Lewandowski is the top scorer here, but Neymar, if I look at Neymar, if he doesn't score, I have a chance to get like 70 to 80. And if he does score, I'm looking at like 100s. Whereas Lewandowski, and I know he scores every game, I don't think his score lines from last year, where he scores literally every freaking game, I don't think that's sustainable, especially as they get worse and they get older.
He's 33, those other guys are 27, 29, so.
Correct. So for me, I have these 3 in a group, and I bought a Depay recently and have looked at a Neymar, just have not bought one. I have Insigne in a group of his own, And then, so I don't even include Mbappe. Mbappe is just Mbappe is the card I want. If I could have an Mbappe just to have, I would have him. But he's not as good as Depay. I would play Depay over him every single week. For the most part, obviously, the better his matchup is, and if Depay has a bad matchup, that'll change things. But like, I obviously want him. I just don't even include him in any of these conversations because for me right now, he's not attainable. He is attainable, but like, I'm not going to go pay 10 ether.
You're not paying for utility.
Correct.
And you're not even paying for celebrity at this point. He's just like a ridiculous category.
Correct. And my hope is that I can win a Mbappe. And I had a chance to be on a podium this week, which would have been, in theory, an Mbappe shot. So anyways, I have these three in a tier. I have him in a tier by himself. Then I have Benzema, Lukaku, Ronaldo, and Muller in a tier, I think. And then after that, I have like Ciro, Salah, Griezmann. I actually prefer Griezmann over all of these guys. He's probably a step above, but that's because of his international utility. And this is why I don't have a Ciro, Salah, because I don't really view them much differently than Toko Ekambi right now.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And so like that's how I group forward. Similarly, if I go to midfielder, I have a group that is Kimmich, Kroos, De Bruyne. And as you see, Kroos scores a bit more, but he's a bit older. So I have the group as like these three. Then I have a group of like this. And then I have a group of like this-ish. So anyways, like, I have decided to go out and buy a super rare that's a decent mid. I don't want to spend 15 ether on Kimmich super rare. Well, I don't know exactly what his price is. Like, as you see, like,
that's fair.
You can see in the sale markets, Kimmich super rare is not going to sell. Kroos super rare is not going to sell because the people that own those cards use them every single week, and they're not going to sell him for 8 ether. They're going to sell him for 15 to 20 because they need to offset what they lose. You can see that Ilke is up there, but I kind of think he's more of a mirage than these other guys. I'm not as interested in him. So anyways, I went out last week and I bought a Sergej Milinkovic-Savic super rare for around 2 ether. So my thoughts are I'm going to give up about 5 or so points per week to the elite guys, but I'm going to make up for that by having 15 ether to spend elsewhere compared to that. So for me, right now in my building process, getting Sergej Milinkovic-Savic super rare, Kit or Kroos rare, and a Depay rare, which is what I just did recently. I spent about 1 ether on Kroos rare, 1 ether on a Depay rare, 2 ether on a Milinkovic-Savic super rare. So it cost me about 4 ether. For me, getting those 3 cards to supplement my lineup was more valuable than paying 15 ether for a Kimmich super rare. 100%. You're more at the stage where, like, for you, paying 15 ether for a Kimmich super rare is more viable than that. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I did. I don't think I got the number 1, maybe like number 3 or 4, but I remember I paid 15 ETH at the time for his super rare.
Perfect.
And De Bruyne didn't exist at the time near the Gundogan, so it was basically, I don't even think, was Real Madrid on at the time? They might not have been. So at the time, Kimmich's card was, so I'm just trying to see down that list who else would have been there. Maybe Verratti was like the next best one. And it was like, so if I own this Kimmich super rare, I'm going to have such a much better chance to win every single week. And then in my time horizon for return on these cards is so long. I think about it, at least 1 season is the shortest I would think about it, but I'm thinking about these cards for as long as they can play at their prime level. So for Kimmich, I'm like, if I own him for 5 years, like, it's going to be return way more than 15 ETH.
Correct. And that's the same thought process I go through with my investments. So, for example, AJ paid 15 ETH for a Kimmich super rare. He's pretty confident over time he's going to make, let's say, 500% ROI on that card. Just from a utility standpoint, not even a selling standpoint, from a utility standpoint. So for me, I thought the exact same thing with Depay. I think I can make a 500% or plus return on Depay in a shorter time frame without even selling the card. So the decisions are different. Similar, like you guys that are like a little bit lower down that are maybe playing Division 4, trying to get some cards in Division 4, you might buy. Now let's scroll down here. And again, like I recommend to people not to play Champion Europe until you have a significant gallery, because you can get players that do better elsewhere, as we just talked about earlier, for a lot cheaper. So for me, let's say you're someone that's playing Champion Europe D4 and you're just sort of coming into it. Well, you could get a Rodrigo Bentancur for like 0.2 ether. And he, as you see here, has quite a decent score log. It's not bad at all. He's going to get you some 65, 70s. He's going to produce you like 55 or so, even when he doesn't have the best game. And this guy could be a guy you decide is like, hey, I'm going to get a 500% ROI on this card. So it is all relative sort of to what you're playing and like what divisions you're in. So
totally. And and if you're, just starting out or you're playing with a smaller budget, obviously buying rares and limiteds helps with that. But even if you can't buy the guys at the very top of each position within your like scarcity that you're playing, you can be, there's ways to do it. There's ways to be sneaky, right? You find people who have been out injured for a year and everyone forgot about that. You find people that transferred and they're maybe going to have super improved chances of scoring better. So there's a lot of ways to find players who aren't at that top of the list who could get a lot closer to the top of the list.
100%.
Because that list isn't stagnant for the next 5 years. That there's maybe a few people who stay at the top of their positions for the next 5 years, but other than that, it's going to shuffle around a lot. So that's where the game comes in, really.
We recently just talked about someone we've talked about is Luka Modric. So he is quite old. We don't know if he has that many years left in him, but he scores as good as all of these other guys except for the top couple. The issue is that we expect him to sort of decline and eventually leave Champ Europe, maybe go to MLS. But again, if he goes to MLS for 2 years and plays at this exact score line, he's a top 3 mid in the MLS, which again provides utility that may be a little bit under the cover. So in terms of Modric, like what was, I know you've talked about recently, like you're stockpiling Modric super rares. You're like all in on him because you said that his price is not fair to what he produces. So why don't you talk a little bit about your thought process with Modric?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know why it says 3 ETH there as his average price, but that's what I think it's worth. But people have been coming to me to want to buy his super rare. A lot of people, for the reason that you're pointing out. It's like, oh, they're thinking, okay, he's older, but he's almost a top scorer. Like, maybe I can get him cheap. But to me, like you said, he's got at least this season at Real Madrid, maybe one more. And then he's got MLS or some sort of other easier league where he can smash it for a few years and keep returning money. So to me, I have all that in mind. And plus, he's Real Madrid, one of the biggest teams on the platform in terms of following and people who are going to want to own his card in the future. And he's the only other Ballon d'Or winner than Ronaldo and Messi. So we're going to get Messi soon, but other than that, in the last 15 years, he's the only other one who's won that award. So best footballer of the year. So I just think he has a lot of accolades, a lot of things other than his utility and utility that people aren't recognizing that you explained. So to me, I'm like, no, I don't want to let this guy go for 1 ETH, even though it makes sense from how people are seeing him today. But I'm looking at him longer than just today.
Exactly. And I agree. I was actually one of those people that went to AJ. I was looking at Modric. For me, I'm not willing to pay the price that obviously AJ wants right now because I'm worried about his age. Obviously, he just got injured actually and missed this week, which is funny.
Yeah.
Not for you, not funny for you, but like just funny in terms of this conversation that we had over the last week or so. But yeah, also a business that I run, and it's not really a business at all, but AJ approves, is if you guys just look through AJ's gallery and he doesn't like dealing with people sending stupid offers, which he gets frequently. It's absurd. Like I get so many of them, but I just sort of like will talk to people and they're like, I want this card. And I'll go look at AJ's gallery. And I know AJ doesn't use the card. It's random MLS player that AJ definitely doesn't use. And I'm like, all right, I can message AJ. And if you give a fair price, AJ will accept it. So if you guys, I know people will talk about how guys like AJ and other whales won't sell cards, Well, yeah, if you come to AJ and you want a Kevin De Bruyne super rare, he's not going to sell it to you at a price that is reasonable because he uses it every single week. If you want a card like that AJ has that he doesn't use every week, I don't know a card that fits that bill off the top of my head. But if you come to me or AJ, you don't even have to come to me, but I don't mind talking to AJ and it works easy. And you're like, hey, this card is worth like 0.5 ETH. And I look and I'm like, yeah, this card's worth 0.5 ETH. I'll message AJ and be like, hey, this card's worth 0.5 ETH. You don't use it. You want to sell it. And he's usually like, yeah, that's fine. So if you guys want to come and get some cards from AJ, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to AJ and just offer him a fair price on a card that isn't really used by him week in, week out. And you will probably have a decent success rate at it. So
yeah,
try to tout
really
AJ selling his cards.
Yeah, if they're not the top 3 at their position, then I'm probably selling them. And I love this, as you said, like little business that you're running. It really helps me because we have trust, right? We have rapport. We know each other. I trust your valuation on cards. You're all over the market. You're talking to all sorts of people every day, and so like you have a really good pulse on how people are feeling. So I think you're like a great broker / middleman because you can come to me and maybe I go to you and I'm like, hey man, can I sell this Modric for 2 ETH? I really think he's worth that. And you're like, no, I've talked to everyone who wants his card and no one's going to pay more than 1 ETH. And I'm just like, well, dang it. But I trust you and I know you're right. And so you may have people on the other end who want to buy one and they want to pay 1 ETH. And then you kind of get us to the middle. And we've sold a lot of cards like that. And that's really nice because maybe I don't trust these other people. I've never talked to these people before. It's the first time we're talking. And they're like, oh, he's worth 1 ETH. Trust me. And I'm like, I don't have time to get to know you and figure out if this is the right price for him. Whereas I know you, I trust you, you're a great middleman. And so that's why it works.
Yeah. And the thing is, like with this, like with how I've done things with him, and I probably sent you like 20 Ether worth of sales, haven't I?
Oh yeah. No,
yeah, it's like it's substantial. It's just like, hey, someone's talking to me and I'm talking to someone in Discord and they're like, hey man, I really want a Luka Modric. And I am like, oh hey, AJ has one. No, it's not Luka Modric. I'm using someone else I'm just using him as an example. More so it's players that are like the 50th at their position. Yeah. And I come to AJ and I'm like, hey, this card's worth 0.7 ETH. This was his last sale. Are you interested in selling this price? And he's usually like, yeah, that's fine. So would you agree that that's pretty much how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
So, all right. Great. So last thing that we'll talk about here before we wrap up for the show is Lionel Messi. We might as well bring out the big elephant in the room coming out. Sure. As someone that prioritizes Champion Europe, Division 2, Division 1, and Division 3 and 4 realistically. This is a player, I'm going to pull him up. We just talked about the difference in gaps between like the top end midfielders, the top end forwards and whatnot. Lionel Messi absolutely obliterates all of these people. And not even to mention, like, I think he's probably better at PSG than he was at Barca because the players he's going to be playing with are better and the league is probably worse. So this is a guy that, like,
he's going to be getting 3 assists and 1 goal every game.
Yeah, as you can see here, like, this is a guy that's going to get hundreds just over and over.
Not to mention his all around, because the guy puts in work. He's not.
Yeah, like, even if he doesn't score like 3 goals, he's going to get you like 90 points. And like, even like these games, he doesn't even have a goal and he's putting up 60s, which is what you like realistically want from everyone realistically. So with him coming onto the platform, first of all, what is your strategy with him? What do you think the play is with him? And then also, what do you think his prices are going to be?
Yeah, well, this is the great thing about the state that we're in with Sorare, where there's still new clubs, leagues, and players coming. We don't have everyone. So it's not so much like a closed shop, like I hear people say, where it's like, oh, those guys already own the best players, and like there's no way you can catch them and compete with them. Well, Messi comes onto the platform, and if me and the other, I don't know, top 5, 10 guys who always finish near the top of Champion don't buy Messi, then we're screwed, you know? So you have a chance for other people to come in and buy Messi and then maybe scrap and buy, like you said, Milinkovic-Savic, something like that. And all of a sudden you could be beating us. So all that to say, you know, the top 20 biggest accounts will all be trying to get one of his 10 super rares, which will send his price to the freaking moon. And the unique, I don't even want to know. Like, because of the collectability, I actually think somebody who's going to win it will be somebody who doesn't even play the game. You know, it's going to be one of these Cam Ember or Roxy or somebody like that who just loves to spend $200,000 on a card and not use it.
Correct. So here I'll give my opinion, and then we'll go back to pricing here.
Yeah.
So in terms of his utility, and this is exactly my thoughts on it. His rare is better than any other player's card on the forum super rare on the platform. So my personal opinion is that all of his super rares are going to be used in Division 1. Because I think it wouldn't make sense to use them in Division 2. I think almost all of his rares are going to be used in Division 2 because, again, you using his rare is better than you using Lewandowski's super rare. Yeah. So for me, I'm not worried about his super rare or his unique because I'm not playing Division 1 in Champion Europe. I'm only playing Division 2. Now, however, I do want a rare because we talk about how like any team can realistically win, and that is still true. That's not going to change. Yeah. But it's going to be very difficult to podium without Messi in your lineup when he gets all these games. Like, yeah, if he gets 63, you can podium without him in your lineup. But as you see, that doesn't happen very often. So I feel you're going to need his rare in Division 2. And I don't think people are going to really play it in Division 3. So Division 3 and 4, I think no one's going to play in Division 4. No one's going to play in Division 4. And people that are going to buy his rare card even are going to be top accounts or people that come in and like, I think you're going to have to pay a substantial amount, which we'll talk about. I have a number that I think it's going to settle for, and then I'll see what you think. And I think that you're going to need his rare to compete in Division 2. I think in Division 3 and 4, you maybe can get away without him because he might not be deployed there as much.
Yeah.
So anyway, but if you're playing D2, like for me personally, and this is another thing, like I'll ask you this question. So like other cards come out, and I'll use De Bruyne, for example. You have one Kevin De Bruyne rare, right?
One rare, one super rare.
Yep. Yeah, and you're not really looking to add any more rares, right?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I only look to add him because it's like one of these cards where if you don't have it and you're competing at the top, you're going to lose your place.
Correct. Now, the question I have for you is, as someone that plays global America or global divisions 1 and 2 and Champion Europe, are you planning to owning multiple Messis if you have that ability?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or would you sell it? So, for example, if I gave you 2 Messis at the same price, whatever the price ends up becoming, like that flattens out, will you hold a second Messi rare to play in global D2 or whatever, or 6 of them so you could play them in all of the Champion Europe divisions, or would you sell the second one on?
That's an interesting question. It depends where his price is, but assuming it's around Mbappe level, which is where I'm thinking in my mind, I would only buy one and then hope to win a second one, which is kind of where I am with Mbappe. I've bought one or a few of them over time. But anyways, I have 2 right now that one I've paid for, one I've won. And like that makes me feel good about owning 2 of them.
Yeah, of course. And that's sort of my plan is I eventually want to win Mbappe's and Messi's. And like my hope is to win one and then I won't sell the one. If I got a second, I might sell it. Messi's just such a different card. So you just talked about price point. You think Messi's going to be around Mbappe, which we will call 6 to 8 ether. Would you agree with that? That's where you think Messi's going to be?
For the rare, I think it's around Mbappe, but I would my next thought process is okay, maybe less because he's obviously much older. He doesn't have as much utility left. But then I think you add some for his scores being even better than Mbappe, and he's just moved to PSG, so there's all this excitement. Yeah, I think his price will flatten around, let's call it 5 to 8.
Okay, so I think his price is going to end up like 15
for rare.
For rare, And
that's insane. How can
and
that be? I don't know if there's
could
100 people who can pay that much.
that's part of why I think that it might end up around there, because I don't think we need that many people to own him. I think we need to. I think there could be a situation where you own one, and then your champion or your global division 2 every week is useless because you don't own a second, and you buy a second. So, for example, like all these other cards, like, yeah, do we have, how many people on the platform do we have that will pay 6 ETH for Mbappe? Not tons, because they don't have that availability. I think collectability wise, we might have people that will come and buy the Messis that don't play the game. Like we saw some of these previously. And I think, so we could see people that come in that just buy one and don't play the game. And then I think like all the big accounts are going to want one or have one. And I think the big accounts might end up owning 2 or 3 or 4 because, again, like hypothetically, let's say Division 3, you play Messi in Division 3 as a rare and you captain him. That's a super rare effectively, and you're gonna print rewards in Champion Europe Division 3 with him. That could also include winning one of him. So I think he's going to go somewhere between 10 and 15 once he's settled.
Wow. So what does that say for the first one?
If he is 5, I will 100% have one. If he is 10 to 15, I'm going to try to get one, but I can't guarantee it. If he's over that, I'm going to wait and see. But yeah, anyways, that's my thought process on that. So where do you think the super rare
really interesting.
You must think the super rares are going to be around 15 to 20.
Yeah, I do, because you look at people who have that same sort of like gap that he does to the next best players, and it's who we talked about already, like a Kimmich and a De Bruyne, and they already go for 15 ETH, but maybe because he's a forward and there's a lot fewer, there's not as many forwards, and the gap is actually much wider. So maybe he does sell for a Neymar Mbappe super rare price, which is like 30 plus, and that would make sense if you think the rare is going to be 15. So it's not crazy. Correct. I mean, the unique is definitely going for, depending what the price of ETH is, it could be 100 ETH.
Yeah, and unique, I'm not even going to go into the unique price because, like the unique could not even be something that, like the unique could be literally like 500 ETH or 1,000 ETH.
Yeah.
Like it could be. We don't know.
I'm not going to decide he's going to plop down like, several $1 million.
And the super rare, like for example, like we'll talk about your team. Your team without a Messi super rare in Division 1, I don't know if it can compete realistically. So like, let's say that you have Karapu, Zura, YNWA, etc. All of you need a Messi super rare. Only 5 or so of you can buy a super rare, and then you have to win them. So like, I think the super rare might even be like 50 to 60, 70 ETH.
Jeez.
So like, I think that we could see just substantial numbers on the Messi cards going in, which also though, like, I think it's going to be interesting. Like we talked about earlier, like every card and with it realistically within each person's gallery, you have to make decisions. If you have to spend, let's say 100 Ether to get a Messi rare and a Messi super rare, who knows what this number is going to be? You have 2 options. One, deposit 100 ETH, which may or may not be viable. 2, you have to sell cards to get to 100 ETH. Well, you're probably not going to sell a Kevin De Bruyne super rare to get to 100 ETH. So all of a sudden, someone like you has to be like, all right, hey, this so-and-so unique I have that is like my 20th card, I have to sell this because I want to raise the funds for the Messis. Or I have, I know you have Tio Bongonda super rare. We've talked about it before. Or you have his unique. Maybe you're sitting there, you're like, I can get 15 Ether on this card. I need to start drumming up money to get the Messi unique. And then all of a sudden we're going to have, and this works all the way down. This is why Sorare is so unique. Like you're going to have that plan on like 1,000 or 500 Ether, let's call it. Well, someone else that wants a Messi rare card is going to have to look and be like, hey, I need to drum up, let's call it 10. We'll just meet in the middle of our 2 numbers. Let's call it 10. So someone's got to drum up 10 Ether to get a rare. So like, how would you go about for yourself personally? Like, I know you might just put 100 ether on and be done with it because that makes the most sense for you. But like if you were trying to drum up 100 ether, where would you go in terms of selling your gallery to drum up that number?
Yeah, I really would have to think about it, but I kind of like where you went with it, which is take somebody like a Tio Banganda unique. And as much as I love him and he's super critical to me, yeah, if I can get 15, 20 ETH, then yeah, maybe it makes sense for me to sell him and then be competitive for buying a super rare pack to sell him and a couple other uniques that are worth that much, but Messi super rare can make up for.
Exactly. So anyway, the Messi conversation is something we will have going forward that I think is going to be very interesting. So not just with AJ, with just everyone on the platform is going to be super interested in that. So anyway,
Yeah.
that is going to wrap it up for us today. AJ, do you want to talk to everyone about I know you are part of Blackpool. I don't want to explain it. You'll do a better job of explaining it. That people that maybe aren't as invested on Sorare and other NFT platforms might be interested in. So do you want to talk a bit about Blackpool?
Sure. Yeah. I'll just give the quick overview. So the idea behind Blackpool is that, I mean, the words that we're using is quantitative NFT hedge fund, but that's just basically fancy language for pooling money to buy the best NFTs out there. And then we have a token that people can buy just like you buy Ethereum, the Blackpool token. And you buy the Blackpool token, then you're, essentially quasi owner of those NFTs that are pooled together. So it's basically a way that if you want, let's say for example, we in our group we own the Mbappe unique, the Griezmann unique, Pogba, Kimmich unique, and then a YNWA owns all the Liverpool uniques, which is a pretty special collection that he put together. And then I've got Bruno and a couple other cool ones. So at least from the Sorare side, let's say you're like, man, like those are the coolest cards. The idea is you're able to buy some, you're able to get some of the Blackpool token, and then we're building these things now. Let's say it's like a virtual world gallery that you're able to say, hey, here's essentially my ticket with my Blackpool token, and I can come in and it shows like, yep, you own, like 0.01% of the Bruno unique. Like you're technically an owner of that. It's like not quite a timeshare. I'm trying to think of like a good analog. I don't know if there is one.
It's like owning a team. It's like owning a sporting team. If you own like 1% of Liverpool, like it's similar to that. Like you own 1% of this instead of 1% of like Liverpool.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a perfect example. Yeah. So like LeBron James is like a small percentage owner of that sports group, and so he has a small stake in some teams. Yeah. So that's the idea. Is like it's very few people can afford them, and I think we're going to go in this direction where more and more companies, corporations, and groups are buying these top end cards. So it's not even going to be something unless you're like Jeff Bezos. Can you own these? And then you're going to have to just have a slice of them going forward. So anyways, we are in like 3 or 4 games right now. Our biggest ones are Sorare, which we have like 2,500 ETH worth of NFTs in Sorare. We're in Axie Infinity, which is getting really, really hot right now. And that's a whole nother type of game. We could do an hour explaining Axie Infinity. That's another cool one. That we're in this like spaceship one called Cometh. We have bought these big, like essentially the equivalent of unique cards, NFTs in these other games that aren't even out yet, but they've started selling their NFTs. And like, yeah, we had to like go in and you have to spend like several $100,000 just to like even stake your place when the game does launch to be able to be there in those special areas. So yeah, we're already working on that. We've got a huge team of developers and analysts, finance, marketing people, and then NFT managers like myself. So it's me, YNWA, and Max, who are the Sorare managers.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, for anyone that wants more info on that, if you join up on Sorare, you can find AJ and other members, and you can find your way to the Blackpool Discord as well to find more information on that. So that is going to wrap it up for us today. AJ, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, man, this was fun.
Of course. So we will be back on Wednesday. Again, like I want to give everyone a full broad view of things. Like today, recently we've talked about like middle tier galleries like myself. We talked about a little bit lower, but still decent size with Fear the Turtle. We talked about another like middle type of gallery with Andy Black or the first show we had. So the idea is that we're going to show everyone a broad view of things. So I wanted to bring AJ on to talk about what some guys at the top end might be thinking about. Next show this week, make sure you stay tuned. We're going to have some bargain bin shopping. We're going to look for cheap guys to buy in different regions and talk about how like you should approach things if you are going onto the platform with like 1 Ether and that's all you want to spend. So make sure you take a look out for that one later in the week. It'll be a great episode just like this one, just totally opposite ends of the spectrum. So anyways,
I'm going to be watching that because I'm sure there's some things that those managers do that I could learn from too.
Definitely. So. I'll talk about the Asian leagues and it'll help you out with Japan because I know that you're not familiar with those guys. So
I just do the lazy Kawasaki frontal and that's it.
Exactly. And that it's worked for you. You won the Asian division last week. So
it's been all right. Yeah.
Thanks to you. Fine. So, all right. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for us. For AJ, I am Sean. I hope everyone has a good game week and good luck. We'll talk to you later.
Good luck.